So I just got through watching Valkyrie with Tom Cruise, directed by Bryan Singer, for the first time. I know it's 2013. I believe this film came out in 2008. Yeah, so it's been out for a few years, and I'm just now seeing it 5 years later. And here's what I think of the film. Overall, I was impressed. I was pretty glad I saw this film. Overall, my impression of it is that it is a very well made film. The performances, the costume design, the direction, the lighting, everything works in this film. Everything connects. And you really get a sense that when you watch this movie that the production team had exactly in mind what they wanted to make. And there was a clear execution from the first frame to the last. Now, the film does open up with a bang. You do get to see the main character, Tom Cruise, who plays Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg. Probably mispronouncing that, but you get to see him, how he received his injuries, the sacrifices he gave for his country, because ultimately you do find out this guy is a patriot, and as many patriots have done in the past, they don't follow their leaders of their nations blindly. They follow the ideals that those nations stand for. And you really get the sense when you're watching this film that that's what Stauffenberg stood for, is what Germany should have, been about, which is peace and prosperity, and certain ideals that just weren't being presented underneath Adolf Hitler towards the end of World War II. Perhaps he, like many people, was swept up in, the rhetoric and the hopes and dreams of Germany in post-World War One to amount to something greater. I don't know. It doesn't really go much. You don't get to meet him before he is involved with the Wehrmacht or anything. You get to see him as a soldier, as someone who is fighting and literally giving life and limb for their country. You find out that he's married and he has kids. So the question that this film really presents is, what would you, by identifying with Tom Cruise's character, what sacrifices would you be willing to lay down for your country? What if America, say tomorrow, started not standing for the things that you think America should represent? The film opens up and it shows the oath that what I guess was the oath that every person in the German military and government had to take, which is to pledge ultimate allegiance to Adolf Hitler. And I think that that's one of the themes of the film, is that that's where Nazi Germany went wrong, is that it pledged allegiance to a personality instead of an ideal. And they confused this person, Adolf Hitler, as some kind of an ideal, when in fact Adolf Hitler was a very flawed person. Although he may have done things to save Germany, as far as bringing in some types of reform that Hitler was doing some good, but as all human beings do, Hitler had his flaws, and he had perhaps started to notice that victory may not be so imminent for Nazi Germany, and perhaps he entered into the world of desperation and began making decisions and instituting practices. I'm not trying to say that Hitler was just bad towards the end of the war. I don't know enough about Hitler. I'm not a historian. But I do have the general education that I think that most people do have. World War II is an interesting subject for me, so I feel like I've read a little more than the average person, but I'm not going to say I'm an expert on it. Here's my take on it. Those who perhaps followed Hitler at first thought that he was going to bring utopia. I mean, let's face it, there were people that started seeing that wasn't going to happen. And one of the things I love about this film is at the end, you find out that there were actually 15 attempts, this being the last one. The July 20th, 1944 attempt on Hitler's life was the last of 15. I think I remember growing up in school being told it was something like 2 attempts on Hitler's life. Maybe it was 2 where he actually received injuries or something, but I didn't realize that many attempts had been made on Hitler's life. So the film does present us with the story of this July 20th, 1944 attempt on Hitler's life, and of course the figures involved. That's one of the things I love about this movie, is that it's bringing some real recognition to men and women who were involved in this attempt that had way more courage and way more dedication to the ideals that they felt like Germany should stand for, their nation should stand for, way more than I would ever have. I'm not sure how much of a patriot I am. I'm not sure how much many people in our society would lay down, put their life, their limb, and their families in jeopardy to build a better society and to stand for what's right. One of the things that the film does drive home is you see it. Kind of recurring theme is that these people knew that they probably were not going to be successful. They had hoped that they were, but there was this sense of, hey, this is not an easy task. And one of the things that's really good about the movie, and I think awesome about the people, the real life people who did this attempt, is they knew that even if they failed in assassinating Hitler and taking down Nazi Germany and establishing a better government, they knew that they would stand as a monument in history, that not everybody in Germany was totally behind Hitler, that there were those, even in the highest ranks of the politic and the military, that opposed what Hitler was doing. And I think that that's one of the more emotional parts of it, and the more meaningful parts of the film for me, is that it does justice to these real life people. Now, I have read up on some of the historical accuracy and some of the lives of the actual people involved, and yes, they did leave people out, and yes, they sort of kind of invented things and people to make the story, to serve the story. After all, Hollywood is going to take its liberties with history. But overall, they did a pretty good job, and there's even been plenty of historians and stuff that said, of course the film doesn't nail it exactly how it happened, but it's a faithful representation. I even read that they had a hotshot historian as a consultant for the film, and you can tell they really did their homework. You can tell that they really were passionate about this subject. That gets communicated very well in this film. So overall, I feel like the filmmakers, the actors, the cast and crew were all definitely united in the vision of this film, and that's basically to pay respect to those who were involved in this July 20th, 1944 incident that attempted to stage a military coup in Nazi Germany. It also makes the viewer think about the sacrifices that were made. I have to admit, towards the end, I wasn't bawling like a baby, but I did cry a little bit. I shed a few tears because it was very sad knowing you got to really know these characters. And the funny thing is I knew when I started watching the film, I knew they weren't going to be successful. I know that Hitler didn't die in 1944. I know that he didn't die through assassination. So I knew that this film wasn't like one of those what if films. I knew that it was I knew that the film was trying to tell real life events as they happened. But the film, even though I knew what was going to happen and what wasn't going to happen, it really did have me in suspense. In one scene, it was so much tension, and I couldn't quite figure out what was going to go next. And every once in a while, there'd be these little things that happen, and you think that the plot's just going to get totally uncovered, and you think, oh crap, they're busted. The director does a good job of flirting with the audience, keeping them in suspense. It's not one of those films where you watch it and it's just overdone how much they string you along and there's all these little false things. In this film, you get a real sense of danger. I felt like I was there. I felt like I was, I was concerned for the safety of some of these people. And then ultimately when they, I don't think there's any spoilers here, but ultimately when they were not successful, I felt bad for them. And they had given so much, and you felt like that, they were really standing on the right side of history. And nowadays we know they were standing on the right side of history, but it was sad having to relive the sacrifices they made, and to think about, what a terrible end it came to. But there is some light at the end of the tunnel. We now know that stand as a testament, like I said, that not everybody was like in Steven Spielberg's movies. Not everybody was an evil Nazi. Nazi does not equate just completely despicable human being. The film is just a really well made historical thriller involving these events. So if you haven't seen Valkyrie yet, I would highly recommend it. It looks absolutely beautiful. The costumes, the sets. I'm sure they used some CGI to recreate Nazi Germany, but I really couldn't tell. Everything seemed really authentic and real. You could tell there was an immense amount of production value to this. There was even this one scene. All that was happening is that this guy was delivering a letter to this like general or some kind of leader, and they had a bird's eye view of the pool that the guy was swimming in, and you could tell that there was that where they had made at the bottom of the pool this huge swastika. And I'm sitting there thinking, I don't think that's like a CGI effect, because it was underneath the water and they showed it from different angles and stuff. I don't know, maybe it was CGI, but I couldn't help but thinking they had to, either completely build that pool or tear up a significant part of an existing pool and tile in that swastika. And I mean, that alone is, a lot of production value. So amazing attention to detail, both with the mise en scène. I can't remember much about the soundtrack. I think there was a soundtrack, but it was one of those soundtracks where it may have heightened the tension when it needed to be, and may have been, it did the job of enhancing the emotions that the performances and the mise en scène presented. So it wasn't it wasn't like a John Williams musical score where you come out humming themes or nothing. It's not a soundtrack that I don't think I would listen to outside of the film. But overall, every aspect of filmmaking was well executed, especially if you're into World War II history. I think you'll really like this film. I would rate it on a scale from 1 to 10 as a 9, maybe 9.5. I mean, it's a really well made film. It knows what genre it is, it sticks to it. Excellently directed, because from the first frame to the last, it has a unity of vision and purpose and scope, and it hits every you could tell every time they wanted you to feel something, it hit. The film was well made. The performances are great, so I highly recommend it. Again, 9 out of 10. Check out Valkyrie.